Good morning, everyone. So, welcome to the ICT Educators New South Wales virtual conference, and I welcome you. And from wherever you are, and from your various abodes around the state. My name's Karen Binns, and I'm president of ICT in New South Wales, and I'm looking forward to all the different people who have prepared different presentations for us today. I'm excited to hear about what's happening with cybersecurity and the lay of the land in education. And I hope you enjoy the next 2 days for as many sessions as you can attend. I first of all would like to hand over to Martin, who's going to do our welcome to country for us.
Yeah, good morning, everyone, on this fine day. I'll do an acknowledgement of country and would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the various lands on which we meet. And you might like to put into the chat the land upon which you are currently standing, sitting, or whatever. I'm on the lands of the Anawan people, predominantly in Armidale, New South Wales. We do also have some Gumroy people as well. We'd like to pay our respect to all elders, past, present, and emerging, and extend this respect to all Aboriginal people who join us today. We come together in peace, in harmony, and with all those who share this land.
Thank you, Martin. Just some housekeeping things before I hand over to Mel. So Martin is on our board and Mel is on the board, and Helen is our secretary in the corner up there. And who else? We've got Meredith is here this morning from the board, so welcome. Our sponsors for this weekend are Kai's Clan, who do various robotics and AR and VR experiences and equipment for schools, and they'll be here later today at lunchtime to have a chat with anybody that's interested in what they've got to offer, and they're running a session tomorrow as well. And the news of the day is with Little Bird Electronics and their sponsorship of our conference, they are offering all of those of you that attend this weekend and a $30 gift voucher, and we were hoping to send you all a microbit. And as most of you probably know, you can't buy them anywhere at the moment, and they're not going to be in the country for at least another 3 weeks. So Little Bird said that once the conference is over, and I'll send them in a spreadsheet of who was attending, they will send you an email with a code in it, and that will give you a $30 voucher to spend inside the Little Bird store. And you can wait for the microbit to come in, or you can buy yourself a new sensor if you already have a microbit. So round of applause for our sponsors this weekend, and we thank them for their support of our organisation. During today, there will be two breakout rooms with, stick this up, and this is how we're going to work this. You're going to self-nominate what breakout room you would like to use today and what session you want to go to. I will put this in the chat a little bit later on. And in the main session room, we'll have the keynote, and then followed up with Kim Vernon, and then followed up by her workshop on developing a security mindset. And then we've got a half-hour break for morning tea, and then we'll have Bron in this room with the Minecraft session, and then we'll have an hour for lunch, and then we'll have Matt Richards this afternoon with developing Swift apps with Swift Playgrounds. And in room 1, we've got mostly the HSC stream, which is the IPT session at 9:45, and the software design session, and then sharing the ICT resources in the afternoon. And in room 2, there's not much help happening in there till after morning tea, when we'll have the Google training session with Brian and Helen, and then teaching outside with Meredith, and all the exciting things that she's got to tell us about that. That's when you don't want to lose your mouse, you can't find it. All right. Mel, did I forget anything in our chat that we had last night?
We were just going to remind the participants that we'll be recording the sessions for today. So if anyone would like not to be recorded, they might like to take this opportunity to turn their cameras off. And we'll be putting everyone on mute until the end of the sessions, where opportunities for questions will be made available.
Is there any questions so far? Things that people want to ask? No? All right, Mel, I'm going to hand it over to you to introduce Kim, and we'll go from there.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. It's my absolute pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker for this morning, Kim Vernon. She's going to be talking to us about developing a security mindset and that whole concept of cybersecurity and how that fits into what we're going to be needing to teach. Kim Vernon is the Curriculum Specialist Technologies at ACARA. She was a key member of the Digital Technologies in Focus project from 2017 to 2021, supporting schools across New South Wales to implement the digital technologies curriculum from an action research perspective. Previously, Kim has held a position as Head of Integrated Technologies at the British International School in Singapore, where she did that for 7 years, and she has extensive experience in the field of early childhood and primary education, specialising in digital literacy education. As a lead consultant, Kim supported the Ministry of Education Singapore to implement their Playmaker program of non-screen-based coding and programming into 200 preschools. She's passionate about change in technology, focusing on pedagogy and curriculum integration support. And for many years, she's worked with leadership teams, teachers, students, and the industry to support the introduction and inclusion of digital tools across all areas and all year levels of the UK and Australia. Her most recent study is a graduate certificate of cybersecurity, which provides her with a strong research base for supporting privacy and security in the Australian curriculum. So I'd like to welcome Kim and hand over to her. Thank you so much for being with us today, Kim. We're all really looking forward to hearing what you've got to say.
Oh, thanks, Mel. What an introduction. A bit exhausted after hearing you. I didn't realise I'd been around the globe and sort of ticked all of that off. But hello, everyone. Good to see you on a Saturday morning. So I'm fairly open today in both this keynote and in the next presentation that I do to just answering questions as well. So I have 1,000 things to share with you and can probably talk all day, but I don't really want to do that, particularly if there are questions that you would also like answered. Before I share my screen and get started, I just wanted to sort of iterate that I'm going to start this morning's keynote with a bit of a deep dive as well into digital literacy, just so that you can see how we've landed where we have at the Australian curriculum level with the review of that general capability. Then I'll give you a little bit of a taster of cybersecurity so that it might help you make a bit of a decision on where you travel next in the streams after I have finished. But I'm just going to share my screen. Right there. All right, so don't be disheartened. My camera's on the opposite side to what I'm looking at. So if I'm not looking at you, it's because I'm glancing over it, keeping myself on track with my slides. I thought I'd start today just with, like I said, giving you that overview of the review process that we've been through with the ICT capability. I know that that's something that New South Wales was heavily involved in from a review point of view, both from a NESA perspective through to Department of Education and all the school sectors as well. But what we started to do probably 4 years ago when we started our international comparative studies is we started to look at how do other countries talk about and represent this digital capability side of things in their curriculum as well. We're in a fairly unique space in Australia where we have those 3 dimensions at the Australian curriculum level. So we have the general capabilities, the cross-curriculum priorities, and then the content of the learning areas. The general capabilities are always researched and written first because our learning areas use those learning continuums to help them craft the content that the capability would sit in their learning area. So this was a very early piece of work that we undertook, and we started with some research from Briggs and McKees, where they sort of have this continuum, I guess, of where people are working through. So we're not just talking about our students, we're talking about all members of society at the moment, and where they start with their literacy. We felt that literacy was a term that was being used quite extensively. So we looked at their continuum of how we start with no literacy at all, and then we're moving through to that fluency phase of things. That took us to Beetham and Sharp's research, and this was probably the most significant piece of research that we settled on, and their model of e-learning starts with a progression of skills where students start with the access all the way through to the attributes. And the attributes are that stage where students are quite proactive about their digital skills. They're able to apply it in a variety of situations, including unfamiliar situations. So Beetham and Sharp talk about the process of students having, being able to do as well, all the way through to IM. It's part of what I do in my daily life. At this point, we reached out to a number of academics around the country who had extensive research in digital literacy. At this point, we still hadn't settled on whether we were looking at a literacy or a capability. And I'll talk a little bit more about the difference to those in a moment. And they had all sort of started with Beetham and Sharp's research as well to develop their own frameworks for what they were calling digital literacy. So we worked with them to sort of unpack what digital literacy is and how that might look in the space of the Australian curriculum. We reached out to international frameworks as well. And this is where we realised that at the Australian curriculum level, we're a little bit more complex with those three dimensions. Because when you dive into what digital literacy is and how it's different to the capability, to an ICT capability or to a digital capability, it comes down to that critical and creative thinking that sits there, as well as the personal and social side of things. So when you look at a framework such as the DQ framework, which is heavily research-based and an absolutely fantastic framework, it incorporates a lot of what we have in all of our other capabilities as well. So our personal social capability sits there in isolation. Our critical and creative thinking one sits there in isolation, as does the intercultural and ethical understanding as well. And we started to realise that by writing this digital literacy learning continuum, we were starting to duplicate what we already had in some of our other capabilities. So that again took us back a step where we thought, well, we want them to complement each other. We don't want teachers to be looking at these and just seeing a complete duplication of it all, double workload. I've got to do this in a digital aspect as well as over here in more of an analog aspect as well. So that's where the language that we started to use was really important, as well as what the structure of the new capability would look like. So we were tossing up, particularly with critical thinking, when students are analysing information, for example, that behaviour is very much stemmed in the critical thinking side of things. And that behaviour is then expected to transfer over into a digital aspect when they're using digital tools. So that's when we started to shift things out of what would be a digital literacy learning continuum and see what it would look like sitting inside another general capability. We did the same with things like communication and personal social capability. Although we have maintained communication at the end of the day in digital literacy, we've made sure that we've tried to use some language that shows teachers that these two sub-elements in these general capabilities actually talk to each other. So getting teachers to look at the bigger picture when they are looking at digital literacy is really important. We also worked with industry, we worked with tertiary to see how they speak about digital literacy and ICT capabilities. The Australian Qualifications Framework and the Skills Framework, particularly that our VET students would be diving into. Our tertiary institutions use this to set up their own digital literacy expectations for their students as well. And they have added, in 2020, they added digital literacy as a new capability to this framework. So they've got the literacy and numeracy, they've got their core skills for work, and now they've added the digital literacy in. So we worked with Australian government departments to also see how this would complement what we were writing. We wanted to sort of make sure that by the time students got to that level 6 at the end of our learning continuum, which is roughly that sort of year 10 level, that there was another framework, because we know that there is still a bit of that gap with those senior secondaries in those 11 and 12s, because that's not the space that we have a remit to go into. So we wanted to make sure that there was another piece of work that outlined a skill set that our students could move into and that schools could look at in that senior secondary space if they needed to. We also just looked at the words and the terms and how people were sort of talking about this. So we jumped into Google and we did a few analytics and had a bit of a look around over the space of 12 months to see how that was kind of shifting as well. This is just one little example. We did quite a few of these over time and used different combinations of terms as well. You can see that ICT capability from the mid-2000s has started to take a drop in how people are using it within the Google search space. But you can also see that digital literacy in the bottom left-hand corner of my slide there with the 185 hits as compared to the ICT capability, which has only got that 27 million sitting down there as well. But we played around with the term digital fluency as well. And this is where we thought, okay, we really need to look at our definition and what we're actually wanting to get out of this. And our academics were saying, absolutely, we want digital fluency for our students. But in order to get to digital fluency, you need to have the digital literacy grounding it as well. So that's when we worked on our definition for what digital literacy might look like. But trying to send the message that by implementing the digital literacy, students, if they're developing those skills, will be moving into that fluency. We don't have a digital fluency framework, so to speak, based on all the research that our academics do. It is a digital literacy that we're looking at. So that's when we sat down and looked at our definition, and you'll see that the new definition has the word critical thinking in there. We want them to be thinking in a critical way. That's a new element to the definition, and it's an important part. And hopefully it references students back to that critical and creative thinking learning continuum as well, to have a bit of a look at that. But we reached out to the developers and the researchers behind NAP-ICTL National Assessment, the ICLES International Assessment, to also make sure that the definition we were landing on was in line with a literacy based on all of their research as well. And that came back with quite positive feedback. They did offer us some advice as well on some changes to make, which we acted on as well. But we wanted to make sure that what we were talking about in our curriculum sits with what is research-based, sits with what is based on what people are seeing internationally through assessments as well as through other curricula as well. So now I can't show you the exact final version of the learning continuum, but if you are patient enough, within the next couple of weeks, that will be made public. Ministers have asked us not to share it in paper document form. They want it published on the website before we share any other documents as such. But I can talk you through things today, give you those sneak peeks and just kind of make things a little bit clearer for when you do see it on the website. So key changes, as I mentioned, is particularly to that definition, but as well to the structure. So we needed something that was not just representing a capability, which is really about the use of it. We wanted students to be looking at the why, the when, as well as the how attached to what they're doing. So that did require us to make some shuffling and some changes in the structure of it as well. Of course, it's got a new name. So digital literacy is what it will be called moving forward. That was endorsed by ministers very early on in the review process. The full structure, as I mentioned, has been reviewed. All 5 elements and their sub-elements, the naming of those, the definitions of what they mean, and then, of course, the statements that are written per level, all had a complete overhaul as well. The other thing that we needed to do was to remove all references to ICT in our curriculum. So there has been, I guess, over the years, some confusion about what is the difference between our ICT capability and our digital technologies curriculum. We did have some mismessaging, I guess, within other learning areas in the way they spoke about the capability as well. Sometimes they were using lowercase digital technologies to talk about it. And again, teachers were confused. Did they just forget to put the capital letters on? Are they really talking about the curriculum? What's really being spoken about here? So we have actually removed references to ICT, and lowercase digital technologies have come out as terms out of our curriculum. And we've used more generic terms to refer to the capability. So we refer to digital tools. Digital tools is the term, the overarching term that we use. You'll see that written in the learning continuum. You'll see it written in content descriptions for other learning areas as well. And then what I asked the learning areas to do is, when they break that content description down, I wanted them to be a little bit more specific about the types of digital tools within that learning area that students were expected to use. So whether they were geographical tools, whether they were simulations, whatever they were, try and unpack that for teachers, because they can look at digital tools and they may be confident with 1 or 2 types. They might not be the types of tools that are appropriate to actually demonstrate the skill of that learning area. So when we've written this, we haven't written it from a digital technologies curriculum point of view. This is a general capability. It's one that is embedded and should be embedded in all learning areas. We've made that a lot clearer in the connections that we've made to it. So on the website, when you see that, you'll go in and explore some of the elaborations and the content descriptions, and you'll see the icons that represent digital literacy, and you'll be able to see that that's a strong connection. We've only made authentic connections. We didn't want it to become soup. You could almost connect digital literacy to so many things, even sometimes without the word digital there. You go, oh, but you can do that in a digital way. We wanted it to be strong, and we wanted it to be authentic for teachers, so they don't get bogged down with all this other busyness of the curriculum around them as well. So obviously mathematics has a strong link to digital literacy in what they do. There's strong links in the HASS subjects all the way through civics and citizenship as well. When it comes to primary and secondary data, there's strong links to our safety and wellbeing sections in our HPE. So we've really tried to say to our learning areas, hone in on what parts of that capability or that literacy that are really important for your learning area, and let's look at how we can unpack that for teachers. So this is the cross-checking that I just mentioned before. So I guess one of the most important things we did, particularly with our reworked element of practicing digital safety and wellbeing, was we worked with the eSafety Commissioners team. So they were very prevalent in the writing of that and what the terms that we should use are, so that it tries to really link back to the resources that they use. They have an academic, Professor Kerry-Ann Walsh, in online safety that they work with. So she also reviewed it to make sure that it was in line with her research into online safety as well. You'll notice a real strong element of online safety and wellbeing. That came about as a result of the Royal Commission into Child Sexual Abuse in our institutions. And it was a strong message from ministers that they needed online safety to be a lot more prevalent. So it is a big part of digital literacy. We've included wellbeing, we've included privacy and identity, and we've included online safety as such in there as well. A little bit of a sneak peek here. So what we've done with some of the language and sequencing is we've really tried to show teachers how each level, I guess, builds on each other by some of the language and the terms we've used. So you can see here, level 1, which is traditionally our kindergarten or foundation level, that's empty. So what we've actually done is we've said if a skill doesn't actually start at that level 1, we're not making up something to go in there to fill in the box. So we worked with our academics to say, where does the skill start and where does it finish? So in that first year, that first level, you will see some blank boxes, and you will see some more consolidated grouped statements for those students to be working on. But things like contribute to a basic plan, then we want to develop and follow a basic plan. They're going to consolidate that before we actually start tracking within a plan with those things such as those Gantt charts and sort of, I guess, putting tasks to students and receiving tasks from teachers as well. So the language that we've used is quite important. From a digital technologies curriculum perspective, we use this language to help write some of our content descriptions as well, because we felt in that subject, there really wasn't a strong connection to the capability or to the literacy. So we've really tried to strengthen that in that area. So I know that 9:30 was my time to finishing. I've only got a couple more slides on security, but did anyone have any questions about digital literacy? All right, I might just whip through these. This will give you a bit of a taster about what I'm going to talk about in my little breakout session next. But we really tried to clarify in the curriculum, I guess, the differences between safety and security as terms. Sometimes they get a little bit interchanged in how teachers are using them. So we've worked with the Safety Commissioner. We've also worked with AusCyber and a number of academics as well in cybersecurity to really make sure that our glossaries, our definitions are clear on the difference between the two, but also how our learning areas are using them in the content that they've written. So again, that's really clear for teachers. So the difference, I guess, I think I've got a slide. Yeah, I've got a slide on that. So I'll come back to that in a minute. But one of the important things that we've also tried to do is put the human at the forefront of this part of the curriculum in digital technologies, because our human vulnerabilities, our cognitive bias, I guess, very much influences how we design digital systems, how we program them, but also how we use them and just engage with them. And that has a big impact on the security of our data that sits on there as well. So we will have a little bit of a look. And I've got some activities, some takeaway activities, quite practical activities that you could take back to students in the classroom to unpack some of these concepts that I talk about. Safety and security. So we do differentiate. So safety is very much about the human, about the person. So you'll see the word safety used a lot in HPE curriculum. Whenever we mention online safety, that's about the person and their emotions and their mental state that goes with that. When we talk about security, we talk about the data, the infrastructure, the physical things. Now, if there is a breach, a security breach on a system or on data, that can actually have a safety impact on the human being as such. So we've really tried to, in the resources we've developed, try and make that a little bit clearer for our teachers as well. But again, some activities to work through all of that in our breakout session. We talk about the three principles, I guess, and these are mentioned in our curriculum as well. So we talk about I guess, the privacy by design principles. So these are not new principles. They've been used by industry for a number of years, but we want students, particularly in those upper secondary years, to start thinking about these principles, both in the designs and the systems that they're building, but also in the designs that they're engaging with and the systems that they're engaging with as well. So privacy by design principles and the security by design principles are very much used by industry. As I said, our safety by design principles are fairly new. So they were implemented by the eSafety Commissioner. They have a whole lot of toolkits that sit around their safety by design principles, but our design and tech curriculum, it asks students to consider the safety by design principles as well as the digital tech side of the curriculum. But you can see that they overlap. So privacy, security and safety have this space where they all affect each other that they work in, and the curriculum takes students through that as well. And I'll take you through that in our next session. But that's fast and furious, Karen, from me. So that's a thank you. But by all means, if anybody has any questions, more than happy to answer them. If not now, after this session, by all means, email them through to me as well. So anything from anybody?
Kim, I was wondering whether you had any idea about how this sort of stuff is going to be promulgated to teachers. The experiences that we've had is that the ICT capability, in its older terminology, was pretty severely lacking with a large number of teachers. And I'm wondering whether or not anyone's done any focus group work or something similar to look at what the disposition of teachers are towards having to cope with this, what they will see as an additional
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, we work quite closely with our tertiary friends as well to see how this can be better explained and better embedded into some of the pre-service teacher courses as well. I have started conversations with ICTENSW as well around the ICTENSW standards and what they might look like for teachers. It's very different state to state on how the capability is represented in curricular documents as well. But look, I've been booked in for workshops to work with states and territories. So Tasmania, independent schools in Victoria, I do have a focus on this and want workshops run for their teachers. But again, that's only hitting a small bunch. But I have had conversations with ACCI as well to see how we can work with states and territories, with teacher professional associations to see what we can do. We are working with Grok Academy on how they might support this as well with resources for teachers that might be out there. But look, very much open to how we can support, I guess, New South Wales in particular, seeing this is a New South Wales cohort. We're open to see how, from an ACARA perspective, we can support teachers.
Vlad, did you want to ask your question?
Yes, please. So my question is related to Martin's, and that is that there is a huge difference in practice between the curriculum on paper, between the taught curriculum and the learned curriculum. And over the years, I became more and more skeptical of this top-down process for developing curricula, because this curriculum is fantastic on paper, but how it will be implemented will depend upon many factors.
Yeah.
Who is teaching it, how much time they have. So in practice, in schools, you have, for example, textile teachers teaching digital technologies. You have social sciences teachers who have not time, who are hard pressed to learn everything, right? So the key to success, in my opinion, is to have great resources that teachers can use out of the box, and those who are more capable and more knowledgeable can customize. But something that is out of the box is definitely a necessity in the current circumstances. Teacher shortage, lack of teacher time for preparation, and so on. So it is great that Grok Learning will be involved, but Grok Learning is mostly paid service. So can you please shed a little bit of light, more light about whether and how do you plan to deliver resources that can be used out of the box?
So a simple answer to that, Vlad, is that ACARA is only permitted to develop a certain amount of resources, and they are work samples. So our only remit is to write a curriculum, and that's what we've done. States and territories have the role of implementation. So we're allowed to develop work samples that support it. We have been able to produce some resources through the Digital Technologies in Focus project, and that's because it wasn't directly related to ACARA as such. We have to pretty much be invited into states and territories to be able to work with them. So I don't have a very happy answer for you on how we are going to do that, because that's not our role. But part of my role is meeting regularly with states and territories, continuing the message of this is difficult for teachers, and working with them, trying to pull them together to see how they can support their states and territories in implementing this. They've all been heavily involved in the review. We had a teacher reference group, so they were teachers out of the classroom that came in for the capabilities as well as for the learning areas, who had a big say. We also had a primary reference group of primary teachers from early years all the way through, who unpacked and picked and looked at every word that we had in here and provided their advice on that, particularly around manageability. But your concerns are concerns that come across our desk regularly. They are concerns that are discussed regularly in our industry groups that we meet with, as well as in our state and territory groups that we meet with. Unfortunately, Vlad, I don't have an answer for you. From an ACARA perspective, we would love, I would love to be able to do more of this, but we do have some restrictions around us, unfortunately.
And Kim, if I could just add, based on your presentation of the changes that have been made to the ICT capability, which is now the digital literacy, which is now described as digital literacy, obviously, based on your presentation and what I know of your work, that the idea is very much to try and remove as much of the things in the last version that were causing confusion amongst teachers, and things where you know, people weren't really sure how to go about teaching it. So from what I can see, there's been a huge amount of work done to, you know, provide more clarity around that, to make it easier for people who perhaps don't feel so comfortable.
Yeah, there has. And look, we don't have any say, I guess, in how states and territories represent all of this. That's purely their decisions, and the capability, digital literacy or ICT capability, is currently represented differently in a few different states and territories on the way it's packaged for teachers. But we're not part of that. So, you know, that's where there is also some confusion nationally. Some teachers in some states presume that other states are going about it in exactly the same way as they are, and that's not the case.
Alrighty, I'm mindful of the time, and I can see Sujatha has a question. Sujatha, would you like to be our final question asker?
Thank you. Very quick question. Firstly, thanks, Kim. I think the update was great, and the distinction between the digital skills that lead to fluency and the digital technologies curriculum as a learning area, I think that's fantastic, much needed, and I think it will do a lot to ease the load of technologies teachers who are currently often tasked with being the IT person at their schools and tasked with teaching ICT general capabilities across the board. My question is more around, related to some of the comments that have come out before. A while ago, we would see ICT integrators at every school. And over the last 5 or so years, we've started to see those roles diminish as teachers are expected to be fluent in how they integrate technology meaningfully into their practice. Do you see there perhaps being a resurgence of the need for this type of role, given that there's been a slight change in language and how it's represented in the general capabilities?
Oh, look, there's probably some sort of research, I guess, to say, yes, that would be nice, but also some to say, look, if you're working from an Australian curriculum point of view, in the content descriptions and the elaborations, it's all been embedded. So it's all there in a very clear, concise way for teachers to say, when I'm actually teaching this content description, I'm actually engaging with digital tools because it's written there for my students. And here's some examples of what those digital tools might be, or an activity might be, in order to meet that content description as such. So to see that pulled out, I guess, into one role is not something that I probably would want to see in a school like we currently have in some schools, I guess. It really needs to stay embedded in the classroom and in the learning and what's happening in there. I think what should happen, and particularly in our secondary schools, is a lot more cross-departmental conversations around what the literacy looks like. It's there in the curriculum. So history teachers talking to mathematics teachers and to science teachers about how they're hitting that and trying to support each other, I guess. But as soon as we start to pull it away from where the students are embedded with that and the conversation that should be happening around that, we start to lose elements of the literacy, I guess. The fluency may be there in some way, but that deeper understanding that needs to come with the literacy may be lacking.
That's terrific. And I think that's a great place for us to stop. Thank you so much, Kim. A lot of really clear, fantastic information for us to pass on to people that we're working with. And as Sujatha rightly says, you know, in schools, the person who has the most knowledge about digital technologies is often the go-to person for everything technology. So this is really insightful for all of us. So I would like to invite everybody who's interested in continuing to listen to Kim's insights about the changes to the Australian curriculum, particularly around developing a security mindset, to come to her next session. I'll hand over to Karen to tell us how that's all going to happen. Remind us which rooms.
Yep. So all of those people, you're just going to stay right here where you are. For those that want to join Chris over to look at the IPT stuff, that's going to happen in room 1. So hey Chris, good morning.
Howdy.
So if you would, those people would like to go over there, but I'm just going to give everybody a 5-minute transition time to sort of go fill up their water bottle or grab that drink or do what they might need to do in this time set. So just again, if you're going to continue with Kim with her session and her workshop, you're going to stay here in the main room, and all those people wanting to do IPT will head over to room 1. So you, I will open the breakout rooms. That would be a good idea. So they're now open, and you're self-assigning today. So if you want to wander backwards and forwards, that's okay too. Yeah, so I'm not putting you anywhere. You just click on the breakout room button on your toolbar in Zoom and join a room. So 5-minute break, and we'll come back. I'm going to stop this recording.